Welcome back to the table. Today is Halloween when we're recording this. So it's quite fitting because we're going to be talking about Vampire the Masquerade Chapters Montreal.
That's right.
And if you've watched the channel at all, you know that Ryan has talked about this game for quite some time. We've recognized that he's incredibly enthusiastic about it every time he talks about it because we had a prototype at one point. He had some time with it and fell in love with it. And we now have not the final game, but effectively a pre-production version of the game.
Like a really nice pre-production version that actually has more than the starting chapter, that has all the different characters, all the cards and items, and everything we could play through the entire full game.
It has a lot of books, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, which we haven't. This is a long game. In fact, I mean, this is one of those narrative experience games, those adventure games that are played through a number of sessions. I don't know exactly how many because there's a lot of branching paths. There's some ways to get through the story without playing some of the side quests and some of the alternate ways you can do things. But there's a lot of sessions. In fact, it's like 6 chapters just for the first act of the game. And the game is broken up to all of these different acts.
Yeah, and Ryan just put me through the motions on the first of those 6 chapters. So we didn't even really get through that whole first section. But we did effectively play what I think most people would regard as a scenario.
Yeah.
When you sit down to play any game like this, this could be one session. I think with a game like this, it would be pretty short on the one session side. You could play a few sessions and it'll probably take you a couple hours.
I mean, you could play, if you were gathering together, you could play through a whole act. There's these interludes that break it up. You could play up to the next interlude in one day if you really wanted to. It would take several hours. But each scenario is kind of broken down into bite-sized chunks to give you just a little segment of the story as you're progressing. And each one of these scenarios is just filled with narrative and with decisions and with the choose your own adventure elements that affect not only that one particular scenario, but also extend out to all of the different chaining scenarios and direct the path that you're taking through this entire campaign.
Yeah, I mean, like he said, it will create branches throughout the entire campaign, but what I was most impressed with or most surprised by was the amount of decision making that happens on the micro level within one scenario. This is not one of those games where you just play a scenario and then at the end of the scenario, here are 2 choices.
Right.
While you're playing the scenario, with literally almost everything you interact with, every person, everything you investigate, you might have a couple options. Sometimes not, but in most cases you have a couple, maybe more options, and you're like, okay, I think I'll do this. Many of those involve some skill checks. Some of them don't. And you're going to be looking at your character. We picked a couple characters. I think Ryan kind of randomly pulled these out because
I picked characters that I thought we would like to play. I didn't realize I picked 2 characters that are very social, and neither one's very good at fighting.
We were both very strong on the social front. So without spoiling too much that went on here, early on in the session, when we were interacting with some people that we weren't fighting, we were able to actually be fairly successful. But then when the fighting started, it was a little bit of a different story. But still, this is the first scenario, so it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, like I said, the first scenario, and each character that you play, you can actually build your own character. For those who have played Vampire the Masquerade before, this is set in that world. You're playing as vampires, members of the kindred, and you can create your character in one of the different many clans of vampire, or you can just use a pre-made character sheet, which is what we did, that kind of fills in all of our starting skills and disciplines and things like that for us. It determines a lot. It determines your starting combat deck. It determines your starting discipline cards, and you can fully customize your character. There's rules in there for starting off with a completely blank slate, but we chose to use these pre-made ones so you can kind of jump right into the action, which is, I think, a lot easier for people that are less experienced with the role-playing aspect of board games. It lets you get right into playing.
Yeah, and that action that he's talking about was really a lot of skill checks, both with the combat, but also beforehand, because you're going to be interacting with people, and as you make those decisions that I was talking about, if I want to intimidate someone into something versus maybe persuade them, I have different abilities, different sort of subcategories under my social ability to make those checks, rolling a certain number of dice, but then also having a certain number of automatic successes that I could use. So when you're presented with the options as you're sort of reading through this together, players at the table can say, oh wait, let me try to intimidate him. because based on their skill, but they kind of lean into their character and how they're built.
Right, and I've said this before when I was talking about the game, but this is actually, I think, something I really like about it is that you really only get one shot with some of these things. And you don't necessarily know what the outcome of your decisions are going to be. Like, it doesn't tell you choose option A or option B. It chooses you how do you want to act.
Yeah.
And you can choose to act intimidating or kind. And maybe the characters are going to react to you differently based on which one of those things you chose. But you don't know until you open up the book. And each scenario comes with a book that's full of all of the information, all the events that can happen, all of the characters you can interact with, all of the clues that you can investigate over the course of that scenario. It's all in this book. And so when you're taking your turn and you think, I'm going to go talk to those, like these punks over here. I'm going to go talk to these punks. I'm going to go, well, hold on a second. What's your persuasion? Your persuasion's 0, but your intimidate's 4. Oh, so you're probably going to try to intimidate them.
Yeah.
Maybe I want to go. I'm better at persuading them. I don't want to make enemies of these, punk gangster guys, right? So you kind of have that table talk element of who's going to handle what, because success or fail, it drives the story forward, and it can go drastically bad.
Yeah, Ryan had actually played through this scenario a couple times without me. And then he ran me through it and kind of let me make most of the decisions to see where it would go. And I think you said even some of the things that ended up today were different than you'd seen.
I'd say you handled the couple a lot better. You can have the police called on you. You can accidentally start fires. There's bad things that can happen. And there's the overarching organization, the Camarilla. For those who know the vampire lore, that's kind of like the royalty, the organization that kind of runs vampire life.
Uh-huh.
You can take actions that offend them, and they will get angry at you, and eventually you could break what's called the Masquerade, which is the idea that vampires are disguised as humans. That's the whole premise of the Masquerade.
Yeah, to give you an idea, again, without spoiling even this first scenario, we were in a park. There were some vampires that we needed to deal with, but there were also some effectively innocent bystanders, and to avoid breaking that Masquerade, we needed to consider, maybe we should interact with them, maybe scare them off, maybe get them to leave. And we had to do that with basically 3 different groups, and a variety of different things could happen, including even walking away with some items that you got. And I think I got an item in one of the way I dealt with something that he had not gotten in one of his previous plays. And then once the fight broke out, you could see very clearly how that item would help you. Again, I don't want to spoil all of that. But it definitely gave you a benefit for when you use your combat cards. Some of the combat cards kind of pair with some of the items you have. Like I started with this secret or this special umbrella. It says when combined with a weapon combat card, +1 die to your weapon check.
You can use it as a weapon.
Exactly. You poke people with an umbrella. But there's a lot of interesting things that could go down there. And I think even having just played it once to see, I got this thing, but you could play through this thing and not get that at all.
Oh, yeah.
Or things could go sideways.
And you have no idea. And you don't even necessarily know what's going to trigger a combat. You don't know, you might talk to somebody and they might shout and attract the vampire's attention. And now you're in combat before you're ready. You're in combat. There's civilians now that are trying to get out of the way of that fight. That can be bad for you. There's, in this particular instance, an NPC, the vampire who owns the territory we're operating in.
Don't spoil anything.
I'm not going to spoil, but your interactions with him can go a variety of different ways.
Widely variety of different ways.
And it can make the encounter a little easier, a little harder, based on what you've decided. I'll say that. But despite that, what's really neat about this game is that there's a variety of items you can find. There's a variety of effects. The game, when you make a certain decision, it might tell you to take a specific effect card, and then you don't know what that effect card is going to be. It might have flavor text. It might have an actual gameplay effect, or it just might be something that's referenced by a later thing that says, now you can, if you have that card, you can do something else.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I'll tell you what an effect I got, not from this scenario, but from this sort of what do they call
the prologue?
The prologue. For each character, you actually have a book for your character, and you play through a prologue, again, of decisions that feel like a robust scenario in and of themselves. And I got the haunted effect, which basically made it so on my next social check I had some sort of disadvantage, at which point you get rid of that. But again, based on those decisions, there's a lot of things. The items may have some lasting appeal to them. You might be able to hold on to them for longer, but the effects They could come, they could go, they might stay longer, I don't know. Who knows what's in the deck?
It depends on the effect, yeah. And those effects are going to stack over time. Your items that you collect, you're going to be gaining experience points, which you can use to level up your characters, gaining new skills and abilities. But beyond just like the character progression, there's also this attachment to your character's story. Every character, like David said, has that prologue book that's going to break down how you got to where you are at the start of the game. And then, based on which characters you're actually playing, I'm Harold and David is Samuel, there'll be moments in these books that say, well, if you are Harold, you get an additional option that nobody else got.
Even in this main book.
Even in the main book, when you get to some of the chapters that might act differently, and especially during the interludes, which the interludes are kind of breakdowns where it goes like, okay, well, here's the story so far. Interludes are where you can gain potentially side quests, and you're going to see some of these side quests that link directly to your particular characters. So you might meet NPCs, or you might interact with people, or go to scenarios or locations that are singularly important to your particular character's journey. And they're going to give you things that you can access just for that character. And those are all interwoven in to the overall story.
Yeah, that is really cool. We didn't get to that in our session here, but Ryan, we flipped through this big book enough to see some of those things. And the fact that I think when a player at the table is playing along, particularly in a game like this where people are reading out of a book, and oftentimes it's usually one person, but you could take turns. But even if someone's barely starting to feel disengaged from the game, all of a sudden you're reading an interlude that has like, oh, and your player, we can do this now because of it. And it's very specific to them, so it pulls everyone back in from time to time, depending on the scenario.
Yeah, and that's going to go through the entire campaign. I mean, I haven't played, I'll admit, I have not played through this whole giant campaign. This was just a production sample.
Though, I'm sure.
Well, I do have a final copy coming with I got all of it, all the different clans and expansions. What I like, too, is that this main storybook will tell you, too, like, okay, well, if you have a particular expansion, then you could, this is the time to pull some content from that to like maybe you can meet a different character or interact with a different side quest or whatever. And that's all marked in the book.
There's side quests too, which is very cool. And what he was talking about, there's a part where it says you can do side quests. And if you have this expansion, you could select from this side quest as well. So the idea that it gives you almost eventually a little bit of a, not sandbox, but a little bit of a sandbox feel of like, oh, we could keep going on the main quest, or let's do a side quest. That whole concept, it really does feel. He's been saying this for what, 2 years now?
Yeah, since I first played it.
This is the closest thing that he's played to a real RPG out of a box.
And you agree with that now that you've played it?
Well, I mean, I reserve judgment till I play a little bit more.
Sure.
But based on what I've seen here today, it does definitely feel that way. And like he said, he is going to get a final version of this game. I don't know when that's going to be, but when it is, I think. We'll have to play. We'll have to do a little bit of a playthrough on camera.
I'm going to play through. We definitely could do a playthrough on camera.
Maybe this scenario and even the prologues, just to give you guys a flavor of how things kick off.
I'm planning on playing through the entire thing. Like I'm eager to find out where the story goes. It's a very engaging story too, and you start to learn some. Like there's some mysteries already from the beginning, and that first interlude that first arc kind of caps off with a boss fight that really kind of changes things up a little bit and lets you you're like, oh, what's next? I haven't played any farther than that at all, so I'm really eager to get into it. I don't think I'm gonna have enough time with this prototype because we're setting this on.
No, we gotta move this on.
When the final does come, I'll see how far I can get, how fast I can get through it. We'll see.
Well, if you have any questions at all about this, make them in the comments below. I know Ryan for sure will get down there and answer everything. He knows the game more than anyone, at least on our team.
Yeah.
So get down in the comments, and until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then. Congratulations, you got to the end of one of our videos. Now, if you want more practice, just click on the video over here. It's another video. You might not have seen it yet, so click on it. If you don't want to do that, at least click on the subscription button below. That always helps us. And if you want notifications, please ring that bell.